Every few years, someone has the bright idea to spice up Emily Bronte's 1847 novel Wuthering Heights. This year's offering, written and directed by Emerald Fennell, already caused a bit of a stir months before its release by virtue of looking like an absolute train wreck. From the casting choices to the costuming choices to the music choices, there certainly were a lot of choices made that had Emily Brontë fans ready to pick up the pitchforks. Hello and welcome to Spinster's Library. I'm Claudia and I'm not an Emily Brontë fan. The highest compliment I can give her one and only novel is that something about it compelled me to read it not just once, not just twice, but indeed thrice. Start to finish, hating it a little bit more with every reread. I know, it doesn't make sense, but neither does the book. The novel Wuthering Heights reads like it was written by a neglected middle child who couldn't deal with the fact that her sisters were infinitely more talented than her. You probably have to be a neglected middle child in order to appreciate it. I am thankful for the existence of Wuthering Heights the novel for one reason and one reason only. However, I've long been of the opinion that you can make an incredible film or TV adaptation out of a bad book. Recent examples of this include the 2024 adaptation of Jilly Cooper's workplace sexual harassment masquerading as a romance novel Rivals, and last year's gay ice hockey romance Heated Rivalry, which I watched with everyone else on the planet, then tried to read the book and unfortunately couldn't make it past the first few underwhelming chapters. Interestingly, both of these bad books to great TV adaptations have one thing in common. They have two things in common: the word rival in the title and a focus on, you know. Wuthering Heights the novel does not have a focus on, you know. Wuthering Heights the adaptation, on the other hand, does. Does that make it a bad TV adaptation? No. In the long list of terrible choices made by the makers of this film, the addition of sex scenes is practically immaterial. Wuthering Heights the movie is bad. This is not exactly a hot take, since this new adaptation has single-handedly given snarky copywriters some snarky headlines to write. I did consider making a video defending its honor just for the hell of it, but lying is a sin. And the truth is, this film is shit. Alright, sound the spoiler klaxon. This video contains spoilers for Wuthering Heights the novel, spoilers for Wuthering Heights the film, bad language and quite possibly bad takes. You decide. Wuthering Heights tries so hard to be edgy, but in the attempt it manages to tick off every cliché on the list of bad period drama choices. From the obligatory corset tightening scene to the inexplicable decision to cover the entire set in grime. You know, because people didn't clean themselves or their surroundings in the mystical faraway past that is the 1780s. The film is visually anachronistic. None of the people in it look like they belong to the same century as each other. The costumes are all over the place. It's like a Time Lord convention, with the Lintons representing the late Victorian era, Heathcliff looking like he's on the set of an indie pop music video from 2012, and Catherine showing up in a 2020s interpretation of a 1940s does the 1760s style approach. Confused? So am I. However, the weird aesthetic of the hair, costume, makeup and set design didn't bother me as much as I thought it would. Sure, I would have liked a more historically informed approach to the costumes. Dressing the main character in latex and organza post-Bridgerton seems like a bit of a lazy choice. A low-effort way to create a buzz without using the costumes to add depth to the story, like good costume design should aim for. It's not an overtly bad choice to detach the costumes from the time period the story is set in, which, by the way, is the late 18th century. Wuthering Heights the novel was written in the Victorian period, but it's set in the Georgian period. And every time I mention that in a video, there's at least one commenter who's absolutely convinced that I don't know what I'm talking about. Do yourself a favor and Google this before you embarrass yourself in the comment section yet again. I'm right and you're wrong. Anyway, costumes. Yeah, they're not what makes this film bad, but they show how the whole concept of this adaptation lets down the story told in the original novel. In every aspect of this adaptation, it tries to be edgy, it tries to be grungy, and it tries to be modern, but it only manages to be superficial and a bit cringe. I watched the film with someone who's arguably the target demographic. Female, Gen Z, hasn't read the book. After the credits rolled, I felt genuinely bad about dragging her to the cinema. Worse, I finished the film with the inexplicable urge to defend Emily Bronte's original novel, a book I actively dislike. It pains me to say it, but Wuthering Heights deserves better than this. This is a book quite unlike any other published at the time. That's as nice as I'm willing to be about it. Wuthering Heights is unique, and it's edgy as fuck. It deserves an edgy as fuck adaptation that goes beyond public hangings and rainy masturbation sessions on the Yorkshire Dales. I went in expecting an exploration of the dark depths of the human soul. Actually, that's a lie. I went in with no expectations whatsoever because I had previously seen the trailer. But a less cynical viewer who's read and perhaps even enjoyed Wuthering Heights the novel might have gone into the cinema expecting, depth, and instead just got a truly embarrassing sequence of unconvincing fetish scenes. I don't mind the practice of sexing up the classics. Modern directors want to add fucking to the plot, and they can have at it as far as I'm concerned. But what Fennell does here feels less like adding a new sexy dimension to a familiar story, and more like the filmmaking equivalent of drawing a dick onto that classic you're supposed to read for school but haven't. It's juvenile and it's meaningless. Wuthering Heights is not a romance. I'm super stating the obvious, but just in case there's someone here who's not aware of that. And to give the film credit where it's due, it doesn't shy away from showing the destructive nature of Heathcliff's and Catherine's relationship. Throughout it, we see them actively sabotage each other's happiness at every possible opportunity. And to give the film even more credit, in Catherine's case at least, that's quite well done. Margot Robbie plays Catherine with a cruelty and volatility that really matches the angry, emo teen energy of her character in the book. You just have to ignore the fact that the actor is clearly twice the age she's supposed to be. Other than that, film Catherine is broadly recognizable as book Catherine. She's spoiled but ultimately neglected. She spends her free time degrading those she considers inferior. In the film, that's Isabella Linton and Nellie, who's upgraded from a mere plot device to an actual side character. Catherine's infatuation with Heathcliff is convincing. The constant pushing and pulling. Truly, I have few complaints about this portrayal of Catherine. She is unlikable, and that's exactly how she's supposed to be. Because she's not a romance heroine, and this is not a romance. It just sucks that Heathcliff didn't get the memo. I don't want to bore you with too many details about the book because some of you watching have not read it, but book Heathcliff is just as cruel and horrible and unlikable as Catherine, but also power-hungry. After Catherine scorns him in favour of Edgar Linton, Heathcliff makes it his mission not to destroy her and everything she loves, but to own her and everything she loves. That means, in a very 18th century way, owning her home. It's hard for a modern audience to grasp not just the status that's wrapped up in the practice of owning land, but the meaning that comes with it. When Heathcliff returns to Wuthering Heights as a rich man, he's transformed from a racially ambiguous foundling to a gentleman of power and privilege. And he uses that power and privilege to take everything from Catherine. In the book, that is. When Heathcliff returns, his and Catherine's social trajectories have switched direction. He's got money and class and power, whereas she's pregnant. The most vulnerable a woman in the 18th century can get. She's in a precarious position and entirely at the mercy of her husband Edgar. None of that is in the film. None of the commentary on gender and race and society that makes Wuthering Heights the novel arguably still relevant today, made it into this adaptation. Why is it that Heathcliff is treated the way he is by the Lintons and the Earnshaws? Why is it such a kick in the teeth when he returns richer than the rest of them? What drives Catherine's choice to marry Edgar? None of this makes sense once you detach the story from any sort of societal context, whether that's the historical context of the late 18th century, or of the Victorian age, or of the modern day. The director really missed a chance to use this supposedly timeless story to make a point about relationships in a patriarchal white supremacist world. Instead, we get the greatest love story ever told, and a Heathcliff who's whitewashed in more than one way. We see the true extent of Heathcliff's cruelty only after Catherine dies in childbirth. He manipulates his way to ownership both of Wuthering Heights and of Thrushcross Grange. He uses the next generation of emotionally unstable teenagers to complete his revenge on those who victimized him in his own youth. Edgar Linton, Hindley Earnshaw, and ultimately Catherine. And that's where the film adaptation fucked up. The film ends with Catherine's death, not in childbirth, but of sepsis after a miscarriage. In the final minutes, we see Heathcliff distraught by her death, and then a flashback to his and Catherine's childhood, where he promises to love her forever. Then the credits roll. The entire second half of the novel simply doesn't happen in this adaptation. You never see Heathcliff be cruel to Catherine's daughter because Catherine doesn't have a daughter in this film. You never see Heathcliff torture Hindley Earnshaw's son because Hindley doesn't even exist in this film. Catherine dies, and that's where Emerald Fennell concludes the story. To be fair, that's where most Wuthering Heights adaptations conclude the story. So it's not unexpected that this film, too, would completely ignore the second half of the book. But it's yet another way in which this adaptation falls short of its advertised subversiveness. This adaptation is not interested in showing the twisted ways in which Heathcliff executes his revenge. It's only interested in the plot as romance. As soon as the relationship ends, the story ends. And while this film is quite happy to show Catherine as a horrible person who does horrible things, it's weirdly lenient in its portrayal of Heathcliff. I'd go so far as to say it goes out of its way to excuse Heathcliff's actions. And that's not edgy, that's not modern. Excusing toxic masculinity in the way this film does is so dull and predictable and mainstream, and the inclusion of some literal horseplay does not change that. In the film, we see Heathcliff's absolute devotion to Catherine from those early childhood scenes all the way until she scorns him. And even then, his motivation in marrying Isabella is presented as his way of making Catherine jealous. Before he marries Isabella, he explains to her exactly why he's doing that. And Isabella, who up until this point has a weird character arc going from comic relief to cold-blooded psycho, is fine with it. She consents. She consents to the marriage and the dog collar and the public humiliation. Is she of sound mind when she does that? The film leaves that very much up for interpretation. Still, it takes away from the cruelty and severity of Heathcliff's actions. They become watered down. They become little more than a shocking bit of kink lived out within the sanctity of marriage, in an effort to make one's ex jealous. This is not Wuthering Heights but edgy, it's the complete opposite. It's a watered down version of Wuthering Heights with an added sex montage. It shies away from the darkness and misery that makes Wuthering Heights such a pain to get through, in favor of a star-crossed lovers narrative that's not just inaccurate to the book, but also trite and overdone. It's such a basic bitch approach to the story. It relies on the shock factor of seeing, I was going to say the shock factor of seeing tits on screen, but I don't even think there are any tits on screen. That's not the point. The film expects you to be outraged by the bold choices it makes, and then the bold choices are actually just a red vinyl dress, open-air pig butchery, and Charlie XCX. Beneath the aesthetics lies an interpretation of the story that's simply uninspired. This is a film that wants to convince you it's going all the way, when in reality it barely dips its toes into the mess that is Emily Bronte's original novel. She would have been disappointed, and so was I. Thank you for watching. Bye. Alright, sound the spoiler klaxon. Bill, the spoiler klaxon is asleep. Manavi, come here. Bill, can you get the spoiler klaxon to make a noise? You said this was going to be easy. Minerva! Minerva! Do you want to say something? Please say something.
That's too comfortable for her.
I don't want to make her uncomfortable. She's such a doll, like... How are you even a real cat? No, she's just purring. This will just have to do. Like, I'll just have to hope that it'll. Right. This is all we're gonna get from you now, isn't it?
She's just happy looking at the brush.
She's just ridiculous. All right.